They found the house at dusk, when the jungle was folding its green limbs into shadow and the air tasted of wet earth and old secrets. Mara had seen the photograph first, a cracked Polaroid someone had posted on a stormy forum. A two-story house with a sagging porch and shutters like clenched teeth, half swallowed by vines. Local fishermen talked about it in whispers, calling it the Blackwood House, though no map marked the place. It sat in the heart of a jungle so dense the sun only reached it like a rumor. Mara, restless, hungry for a story that might lift her failing podcast, convinced her friends to go. Jonah, her cautious cameraman; Lila, a folklorist with a taste for old riddles; Rey, an ex-soldier who carried a stubborn calm; and Omar, whose easy grin hid a sharp curiosity. They arrived by late afternoon, machetes hacking a path through fen palms and strangler figs. As they pushed through toward the clearing, the house appeared the way a skeleton emerges from fog, whole and wrong. The porch sagged with a sigh. The front door was hung from one hinge, like a mouth ajar. Every window had been shuttered with carved slats, and the paint, if it had ever been paint, had slipped into a pattern of fungus and rot. "Someone lived here," Lila said, kneeling to study a stone set in the walkway. "Or they wanted us to think so." It was carved with a spiral that opened into 5 spokes, each tipped with a faint gold inlay. They set up cameras, joked, drank from water bottles that tasted suddenly metallic, and at nightfall, under a moon that managed only weakness through the canopy, they crossed the porch. The house smelled of dust and cloves and something sweetly rotten. The inside was a museum of wrong objects: a child's porcelain shoe cradled a dead orchid, a suit on a hanger brown like meat, a piano whose keys had been glued into a smile. Signs of life: a cup with lipstick, a pair of boots lay scattered between layers of dust, as though someone had decided to stop maintaining their things one day and then never returned. In the parlor, above the fireplace, hung a painting of the house itself, the same sagging shape, painted decades earlier. Beneath the painting, a brass plaque was nailed crooked: "The 5 keys keep the house at peace." It read, letters pitted by time. They laughed uneasily. A riddle. Lila's smile broke into a train of nervous fascination. "The 5 keys," she said. Double quotes. Look. Maybe it's a ritual, or a protective design. The spiral has 5 spokes. They slept in turns, tired from the hacking through the jungle and the thrill of trespassing. It was Jonah who woke them first. He had been recording when he called, a voice thin with breath. "There's someone outside," he whispered. Footsteps on the porch. They gathered at the window and peered into the night. Shadows moved in the trees, large and slow, but nothing came onto the porch. The air pressed at their cheeks like a living thing. At dawn, one of their cameras was missing, the one Jonah had set to film the house's exterior. The memory card lay on the threshold, ripped clean out of its casing. The footage on it had been erased, replaced with an old loop of static, and a frame where, between blinks of interference, a pale face stared. No eyes, only dark hollows. That afternoon, as Mara walked the back corridor, a whisper threaded through the rafters, a syllable like the hiss between a parent's teeth. She found a paper folded into an origami crane tucked behind a cracked mantle. Inside, scrawled in a hand that trembled as if by long practice, were 5 lines: "The house keeps what you steal. Count the keys, and lock the sorrow. Take not what you owe. Name it true, and you may go. Break the circle, and be called home." Riddle, Lila breathed, joy and dread braided together. A puzzle. Whoever wrote it meant for someone to solve or fail. That night, their radios died at once. Phones lost bars as whole as lungs. At first they blamed the jungle, the interference of insects. But when Rey went out to repair a camera on the east side and never returned, blame turned to a blade. They found his boots by the river 3 hours later, standing upright in the mud as if someone had left them on guard. No blood, no body, just boots. The jungle swallowed the trail as if embarrassed. The house reacted. Doors that had been closed when they slept opened by themselves. A whistling draft came from rooms with no windows. Omar swore he heard the piano in the parlor playing a single, wrong chord at midnight. And sometimes, in the waking hours, there were footsteps inside the walls, careful, patient, like a tenant moving in the dark to rearrange their life. They argued about leaving. Mara wanted the story and wanted Rey found. Lila wanted to stay, to solve the riddle and prove her comfort with old puzzles. Jonah wanted to pack up and run. Omar tried to mediate, his laugh turning thin. They stayed. They always stayed until it was too late. On the third night, Jonah vanished. He had been editing footage in the upstairs room, headphones on, the only window open to a sliver of moon. Mara went to fetch him soup. The room was empty. The chair still warmed. The headphones lay tangled. The external hard drives were gone. The window had been latched from the outside. This time they found traces, faint drag marks leading toward the pantry, a smear of dried coffee, and at the foot of the stairs, crushed pressed flowers forming a crude arrow pointing toward the basement door. They had not known the house had a basement. The door was covered in moss and rust. The keyhole was punched with a small spiral, the same 5-spoke design. Lila looked at the plaque, at the spiral, and swallowed. Maybe the 5 keys are literal, she said. She began to search the house with a fanatic's tenderness, lifting every floorboard, and screwing hinges, searching the lining of curtains and the seams of upholstery. Each place she checked held a token, a brass thimble, a tarnished coin, a child's marble, a carved wooden tooth. 4 items. 4 keys, perhaps. They fit into something that seemed to breathe beneath the house, a lock. Ancient, they slid a coin into the lock. Sci ran through the house as if pleased, and shaped like a hand, fingers splayed in warning. A panel in the floor slid open, revealing a stone stair that spiraled down into loam and silence. They lit a lantern and descended. Mara wanted to go down. Jonah was missing, and the stair smelled of cold and homework and the neatness of graves. The basement was a room with 5 alcoves, each marked with a spoke of the spiral, and each holding a statue carved from some black wood that drank the light. The statues were not people exactly. They were angles that suggested people, a mother folded into herself, a child reaching, a figure tied with rope, a silhouette whose face had been smoothed away. On the far wall, painted beneath the wavering light, was a name list, names scratched in a child's careful script. M. Blackwood, I. Crane, R. Navarro, J. Hale. One name had been freshly added, Jonas. A scraping sound came from behind the statues. They turned, lantern light tremoring, and so Jonah sitting in the corner, eyes wide and glassy, humming. He did not answer when Mara touched his arm. His jaw moved, forming words with a mouth that was slower than sleep. They asked me to count, he said finally, voice as if from water. 5 keys. They need 5. They need mouths. They need names. Mara's skin felt bone-thin. She should have dragged Jonah up and run. Instead, she noticed, with the betrayals of survivors, that the statues' faces had the faint impressions of teeth marks. Tiny crescents, like all the mouths had once been gnawed open. They pushed Jonah out and carried him upstairs. He did not wake. In the parlor, under the painting of the house that matched the house they stood in, Lila sat with the brass thimble in her lap and read the riddle aloud. Name it true, and you may go, she said. We must call each who was taken. Name them. Out loud. Say it so the house hears and releases them. They moved through the rooms like exorcists. They named Rey. They named Jonah, and Jonah's eyes fluttered but did not open. The house, if it had ears, did not release. At dawn, Omar tore his shirt across his chest and thrust the thimble back into the lock, feeling the metal tremor as if something below had shivered. The latch clicked. A smell rose of iron and water, and roses. The porch door slammed, forbidding them with a single, final gust. The house had found another game. That night, Mara woke at the sound of running heavy thumps overhead that scuttled the plaster like rats. She climbed the stairs and found the hallway lined with photographs pinned to the wallpaper. Each picture showed the house at different times in history. People posing on the porch, men in suits, laughing girls with parasols. Beneath the child's photograph was a typed note, "Do not name me." Each face had been scratched out except one, a child with a crooked smile. Someone or something wanted to be named and did not want to be certain names thrown at it. Mara felt the riddle like a live thing behind her ribs. The house wanted a price. Inside lay a thin leather book, its pages brittle with the scent of old nights. In the dim light, Lila found a hidden drawer behind the mantel. Inside, a single line repeated, "The circle keeps, the key breaks, only one who remembers must pass." Mara's hands shook. She realized the puzzle was not how to unlock the house, but how to free its prisoners without adding your name to the list. The house needed 5 names. It kept what it was owed. If you shouted names into the dark, the house would collect them like coins. If you took what you owed, the 5 tokens, you fed the mechanism. But the book hinted at a third-way memory. To pass, one must become the house's memory without naming themselves. Remember but do not give your name. They planned like sailors navigating a reef. When the dark yawned later, Mara told Jonah to stay awake and watch the cameras. Lila and Omar would take to statues and replace them with their tokens, while Mara would whisper the names into the walls like a prayer and try not to say her own. They moved with water-slow care. Lila worked the lock with fingers that trembled but did not quit. Omar pried the wood around the statues and slid the thimble, the coin, the marble, the carved tooth into the hollow like feeding a beast. For each token they placed, the house answered with a creak, like an old throat clearing, and somewhere in the rooms a distant keening grew less raw. Mara stood before the whispering wall and began to speak the names of those the house had taken. Rey, Jonah. The house swallowed them, and the air unclouded. Jonah's breath deepened. His eyes cleared with a blink. She spoke them true, and in her mouth the names became weight. Rey's boots, found by the river, trembled, and then lay quiet. Lila's mouth tasted like rust and petals. Then the house tried to bargain. From the floorboards beneath her feet came a voice like paper rubbing paper. Name me, it sighed. Name the child. Say her name and the rest will be free. Mara remembered the photograph, the child's face, the note, do not name me. Memory flooded her, a laugh on a porch, a broom left leaning, a lullaby with a wrong chord. The house was the memory of something broken, and in naming it, you gave it identity. If she named the child, she might free the others, but she would anchor the house to that name forever. It would become more alive, hungrier. If she refused, the house might take her. She thought of Rey's boots, Jonah's blank stare, Omar's steady hands. She thought of Lila and her riddles, and of the whispered promise of a story that would pay for everything. Then she whispered the truth. You are not a girl. You are not a name. You are not of memory, a hunger for being remembered. I will not teach you a name. The house screamed, not a sound but a tearing of paper. A clatter of ceramics. The statues shuddered, one by one. The carved figures cracked like old ice and dissolved into dust that smelled of river mud and lavender. The tokens, the 5 items they had given, warmed and then fell still. The brass thimble jumped from the lock and into Mara's palm, heavy as a heart. Outside, the jungle convulsed, branches snapped, a wind roared that had not existed since before they arrived, and for a hard turn all living things seemed to ask if the world had tilted. The front door opened. Morning bled into the clearing as if someone had unlocked the sun. They left the house with their cameras and bruised courage. Jonah muttered in his sleep in the back of their battered jeep, fingers curled around the thimble. Rey's boots were there, muddier, with scratch marks along the leather like memory scars. Omar drove, silent, watching the road peel away like skin. Lila clutched the leather book and kept her thumb pressed against the last page, and read. They told the story in fragments later. The podcast episode made Mara's name, and with it came messages, believers, skeptics, and a man who claimed to be from the nearest village. He told them of a child who had slipped into the house long ago, a child named Asha who had loved games and hid things in the walls. She had been forgotten, and the house, grieving, had turned itself into a trap to be filled. You did a dangerous thing, the man said over the phone, voice thatched with age. You left a house that waits for being named. It will call others. Keep the tokens. Do not tell everything. Mara kept the thimble. She kept the memory. Nights later, when the house pressed against her dreams, she would wake with the taste of metal on her tongue. Once, in a crowded bar, she felt fingers brush her shoulder and turned to find the silhouette of a child in a ragged dress. She said nothing. She did not speak the name the house had begged for. She let the memory cool like coal in her chest. The last time they returned, because some stories do not end unless told again, a clearing had reclaimed the path. The house was there, but altered, the shutters closed, the paint darker, the porch free of the footprints they had made. Someone had hung a new plaque by the door with letters crisp and ready. The 5 keys keep the house at peace. Mara traced the letters with a thumb and felt For a thin second, bone deep cold. She kept walking. That night, in a hotel not far from the edge of the jungle, Jonah woke with the thimble in his hand and a smile he did not remember learning. He whispered a name into the dark, not Rey's, not Lila's, a child's name, old and sweet. The thimble grew warm, and the edges of the room moved like breathing. Mara, asleep across the hall, dreamed of a small girl at the window, cheeks pressed to the glass, whispering for someone to play. Mara never spoke the child's name aloud. She would not teach the house new words to hang itself on, but sometimes when the jungle is slow and the night is too full, she thinks she hears a piano far away playing a single wrong chord, and wonders which of them had kept one name too many, and whether forgetting is always a mercy or sometimes a sentence.